Welcome to MCN and welcome to our 2026 A2 Lightweight Adventure Bike Challenge. Now this is the second qualifier to find our Lightweight Adventure Bike of the Year. We've already done the singles, so if you check on YouTube, go and find the first video, you'll find what the winner of that round was. But these are all parallel twins. They're all near enough the same capacity. They're A2 license friendly, so that means they're all pretty close to the 47 brake horsepower limit. We haven't got a control tyre, they're all on different tyres. I just want to make that point clear before we start. Let me introduce you to the bikes one at a time and we'll just do some top level specs to let you know where they are before we head out and we start riding them. Okay, I'm going to run through these in price order, starting from the top to the bottom, because that's the easiest way and the fairest way for me to introduce them to you. First of all, we've got the BMW F450GS, which is a brand new bike for this year. These retail at £6,999. In the trophy trim, which this one is, it's £7,760. Now, at 420cc, it's the smallest capacity engine here, but at 47 brake horse, it's actually the most powerful. We've weighed it fully fueled, 182 kilos. That has come out of the lightest on test. And with a 14-litre tank, it's got the smallest tank. So that's the BMW F450GS. Next up on our list is the Kawasaki KLE500, which is another new bike for this year. It's the SE version, which includes a beefier bash plate, taller screen and TFT dash, all for £6,744. 44.8 brake horsepower, sits roughly in the middle of the pack, and at 196 kilos, it's the second lightest here. We've got a 16-litre tank with a 21-inch front, 17-inch rear wheel combo. The others are 21/18, except the GS, which is 19-inch front and 17-inch rear. Moving on from the Kawasaki, next up we've got the CFMoto 450MT. This bike's been around for a little while, but this is a 2026 version. £5,898 at 449cc. It's the second biggest engine here. 197 kilos, sticks it in the middle of the pack. 41.5 horsepower, so it's the lowest power. And at 17.5 litre tank, again, that sits it in the middle of the pack. Next up, we've got the QJ SRT450RX. These are in the showrooms at £5,799. 449cc engine, so it's the second biggest here. 46.9 brake horsepower, second most powerful. 207 kilos full of fuel, so it's almost the heaviest on test, not quite. And it's got an 18-litre tank. And last but not least, we've got the Moto Morini Allthrike. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's a portmanteau of all-terrain and hike, which is their idea of what an adventure bike should be. 449cc again, seems to be the most popular engine size here, so that again is the second biggest bike. 44.2 brake horsepower, fourth most powerful here. At 217 kilos, it's considerably the heaviest one, but it's also got an 18.5 litre tank, so it's got the biggest fuel tank as well. So that's the basic introduction to the 5 bikes we've got on test. We're going to go and ride them on road, off road. We're going to do some dual carriageway, pretty much everything that you would do in terms of basic lightweight adventure touring. We want to see how capable these bikes are. Well, that's enough for me right now. What we really want to do is get out and ride these bikes, so without further ado, I'm going to stick my lid on and go and see what they're made of. So over the past couple of days, we've put these bikes through 250 miles of mixed riding. We've done some dual carriageways, some motorways, A roads, B roads, and some relatively light green laning, the kind of thing that you're going to do on these. We're not talking gnarly enduro, that kind of thing, just pleasant country unpaved roads. Let's begin by talking about that motorway, the dual carriageway, because if you're going to get one of these bikes, a small adventure bike, you're going to have to do some slogs on it, some travel to get from A to B. Let's work through the bikes as I've got them laid out here. So let's talk about the BMW first of all. I've already mentioned this is the most powerful bike here, and as a result, sitting on the motorway at 68, 69, 70 mile an hour, It's well within its capabilities. It's perfectly comfortable. Overtakes, no problem at all. It's got a lovely comfortable seat on it, and in typical BMW fashion, the screen, although it's small, is effective, and it just does enough of the job to prevent any sort of buffeting or major wind blast. Handguards as well. All the bikes have got handguards, and that just helps a little bit on the motorway as well. So the riding position of the BMW, it's a bit like that kind of horseback position where you're actually sitting on the bike. So although you're quite exposed, that screen, that frontal area does keep you comfortable. So in terms of those motorway slogs, the BMW is a nice place to be. Moving on to the Kawasaki. Again, you've got a nice comfortable seat on the Kawasaki. The riding position I find slightly awkward on this. It's got that 17-inch rear wheel, 21-inch front, and you get this slight sort of cruiser feel off it. You're very aware of that big front wheel on it. I find the foot pegs are quite high, and therefore my knees are quite high, and it's not cramp-inducingly uncomfortable. It's not the most comfortable long distance position in the world because you are sitting on your spine a little bit more. But as I said, the seat is good. What I don't like about the Kawasaki is the screen. I know screens can be subjective, different people, different heights, different gear that you're wearing, but bear in mind that I'm jumping between all of these bikes. There's a lot of noise and a lot of buffeting off the Kawasaki, and I do find that uncomfortable. It is adjustable, but you've got to break out the Allen key. You've got 4 little bolts in there. It's a bit of a faff, and you know, if you are doing that at the side of the road, you're going to lose one. Having said that, if this was your bike, if this was my bike, you'd probably find that sweet spot and would never go near it again. But the way it's set up at the moment, very noisy, very buffety. In terms of how the engine feels at speed, well, no problem at all. It's not particularly buzzy. It's not particularly vibey. Like the BMW, it just does the job nicely. So again, on the motorway, the Kawasaki, absolutely no problem at all. From there, I'm going to leap over to the CFMoto. The CFMoto has got much more of a substantial feel to it than both the Kawasaki and the BMW. You sit right in it. The way it's got that sculpted tank and the way the seat swoops down towards the middle of the bike, it's got that typical adventure bike feel to it, and it's a comfortable, commanding place to be when you're on the motorway. You've got good visibility from it. You're sitting nice and upright. I find my knees aren't too high. Should I just mention I've got a 32-inch side leg, if that's some point of reference. So I do find the CFMoto very comfortable. It has got an adjustable screen, and I find on the lowest setting is the best place for it. The thing with a small screen is if you do have it up too high, like on the Kawasaki, the buffeting is just too annoying. And with this on the low level, for me, I find it just right. It's got a couple of rotary knobs to wind it up and down. It's a little bit crude, but it does the job and does give you some adjustability if you want to wind it up and down. In terms of the engine, well, that has absolutely no problem again at cruising speed. Certainly for these 3 bikes, you're cruising somewhere at about 6,000 RPM, thereabouts on the motorway, 6 to 6,500, and they're perfectly happy there. You just wouldn't want to really sort of push it much more than that. But the CFMoto is a very nice, very comfortable place to be. It's just enough for those long journeys that you can actually sit in that saddle and knock off 200 miles at a stretch without too much of a worry. The QJ, disappointing, is probably the best way I can sum up the QJ. I mean, it's a fantastic looking thing, but the first thing I should mention is the seat. It's a wafer thin piece of foam that the moment you put any weight on it at all just rests on the seat base. The foam seems to disappear entirely. It is heated. I don't actually know where the heated elements are in that. So almost as soon as you get going on the QJ, it's uncomfortable. It's like sitting basically on a plastic base. The engine as well. These engines are very similar, but it's vibey. It's vibey to the point where we did maybe 40 minutes ride, stopped in a lay-by, I got off, and it's very rare that I have that tingling white finger, pins and needles in my hands, but both hands were basically vibrating when I got off this, and my feet as well. Screen's not too bad. Lowest position of the screen, you can see I've got a thing about these screens being in their lowest position, actually works all right on the QJ. Any further up and it starts getting in the way. Now, when talking about the engine, okay, it sits at 70 happily enough. But let's say you're going a little bit slower, you're on a A road and you're going to go for an overtake and you're going to wind those revs up in the engine. Once it gets past that comfortable sort of mid-range, it starts making Not the most pleasant noises in the world. There's nothing particularly clattery or rattly or wrong with it. It just does not sound happy. And that unhappy sound from the engine combined with the uncomfortable seat, the vibey engine, the QJ is just not a nice place to be on the motorway, unfortunately. So jumping from the QJ to the last bike we've got here, last but not least by a long shot, is the Morini Allthrike. It's one of the lowest bikes here. I think you can probably see as we're lined up that it actually sits lowest, but the riding position is quite close to the CFMoto in terms of that adventure bike, scooped out, sitting in the bike sensation. And again, for me, I find it really comfortable. I think I'm just particularly suited to that adventure bike position. You ride high in it, the screen, non-adjustable, but practically the perfect level for me. I can feel the wind blast just towards the top of my chest, which means that any vented gear gets the airflow. The engine as well, it's nice and smooth. The Morini engine is again well within its window when you're on the motorway. It's no doubt got at least another 30 mile an hour in it when you're cruising along at 70. I'm absolutely sure of that. I'm sure if we tried it on a closed road it would do that. So in terms of motorway riding, long distance riding, the CFMoto is the one that I want to be on for that. Closely followed by the Morini, and then although it's got that sitting on the bike, that racehorse riding position, the BMW comes in third for me, and then it's a close run thing between the KLE and the QJMotor, and I'm going to say that the QJ is the least good motorway bike because of all its vibes. The reason that the KLE scores low for me is the turbulence off of that screen. If I changed the screen, it would be a whole different story. But we're talking about the bikes as tested, and we're all talking about it from this standardized tester perspective. So that's our running order for how they are on long distance journeys. Let's look at these bikes now from the perspective of normal riding. Let's have a little talk about the engine, the throttles, the way they behave on the road and the handling. And again, I'm going to stick to this order because it's the easiest way to do it. Therefore, I'm going to start with the BMW. Now, the thing to point out about this bike in particular is that it's got BMW's Easy Ride clutch system. That's based on the Recluse clutch. So it's a centrifugal clutch, it's all mechanical. What it means is that you don't actually have to use the lever, and it's the only bike here that has that system. Do I like it? It's one of those things that it can be a bit Marmite for people. It takes a little while to sort of get your head around how it works. The key thing about this system is that it requires faith, because you're pulling away on throttle alone. It's not an automatic bike because you still have to change gear, but it just takes that bit of initial courage to get over twisting the throttle, knowing that you're going to be able to pull away safely. The F450GS has a 19-inch front wheel, whereas the other bikes here all have 21-inch front wheels, and that does play a certain part in the way this bike feels and handles on the road. Yeah, it's one of the most tractable ones here as well. The throttle response is actually quite nice once you get over the fact that you don't need to use the clutch. The general feel of this bike is quite raw. It's quite vibey in the way it makes its power. It's quite noisy. But I'm not saying any of those as negatives. They're actually positives because it gives you that visceral feeling of riding this bike. Is it over braked? I'd say the brakes are actually quite abrupt. And again, that's how this bike tends to feel. The suspension on this bike is sporty. It's by far the sportiest bike here. In fact, when you look at them all lined up here, you know, it's probably the least adventure bike looking of them all, especially in these colours. It's practically got the BMW motorsport sort of livery on it, being the trophy model. It's the sportiest, it's the most accurate on the road because it's got that slightly smaller front wheel. You just feel that little bit more confident, that little bit more composed, that little bit more accurate when you're tipping into turns and changing direction. And it does that very well. The tyres are Maxxis Max Plore. They feel a bit of a budget OE kind of tyre, but no real issues on the road with the BMW. It's firm, it's sporty, it's good fun to ride. So the KLE500, it's quite apt that this bike is grey because it kind of feels very, very neutral. I know we've got a sparkle of green from that trellis frame in there, but I can't say that I really found much of a sparkle to it. Bland's probably too harsh a word for it, so let's go with neutral. It certainly feels dependable. The nice thing about the Kawasaki is, of all the bikes here, this is the one you kind of feel has the least nonsense about it, has the least frills, the least fuss. It feels the most workmanlike, and in a way that's a bit like the KLE of old. People, you know, used to do overlanding and that kind of thing. It's a different bike, but there is some of that in it. There's some of that long distance dependability in it. In terms of the way it handles, well, it has got that smaller back wheel, larger front wheel. It's extreme for me to say that it feels like a penny farthing, but it kind of does in this company. You do feel like you've got a big front wheel and a small back wheel. The suspension's soft on the KLE. Definitely if you're coming from the GS, which we've already said is taut and sporty. It's not baggy, but it's soft. I would say it's plush for the most part, unless you really want to start pushing it to extremes, but you're not going to ride this bike like that. This is one of these bikes you're going to make progress. I need to get the words plod and progress in there together. You're going to plod along progressively. That is what I'm looking for with the Kawasaki. Brakes are all good as they are on all of these bikes. No issues with the throttle at all. Throttle response is nice and direct. There's no abruptness to it. It's not too sharp. It's well measured. The fueling is nicely dialed in. The Kawasaki, all in all, for general road riding, is adequate. It's middle of the road. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're looking at a bike that you're going to use as a touring workhorse, a small capacity touring workhorse. The KLE does that really, really well. The tyres on this are IRC Trail Winner tyres, and yeah, not really had any problems, as with all the bikes here. All our riding has been in really sunny, dry weather on decent roads, apart from the little bit of trail riding we did. And although they may be not a tyre that you've heard of, these perform just as well on these bikes. They're small capacity, low power bikes, and for the most part, certainly in these near perfect conditions, they're good enough for me. I've already said how much I like the riding position on the CFMoto. The balance is really nice on this bike as well. This one has the same tyres, CST Ambro A42s, which I've not really heard of, but they're on this, the Morini and the QJMotor. That commanding big bike feel to that riding position translates really well to the road as well. KYB suspension, front and rear. It's everything that this bike needs to have, really. We've been on A roads, B roads, fairly twisty stuff, fairly bumpy stuff, and I would say it's definitely within the plush range. Again, it's not as sporty as the BMW, but it's firm enough for you to be able to have proper fun on this CFMoto. On the tarmac, you've got nice wide bars as they all have, but it swings about really nicely. Weight distribution is really good, very neutral, centre of gravity, bang in the middle, and it feels like that when you're on the road. The bike swings from one turn to another, complete confidence. The engine, again, is nice and tractable in the way the BMW is. It pulls really nicely off the throttle. I prefer this because it doesn't have the automated clutch system, but all the same, the clutch it's got is light. It's more fun than the Kawasaki. There's no question that it's more fun than the Kawasaki, and its poise is really good. That's what I was looking for. The poise when you're on this bike, much like when I mentioned about the Motorway, and I have just said about the riding position, but when you are approaching, you can see turns coming, you're sitting in just the right spot on the bike, just the right place to swing those bars in, to swing it from left to right, and it's actually as much a pleasant place to be on the CFMoto when you're on the twisties as it is on the motorways. There's no buzz to it. It's one of those bikes that just kind of feels like a bit of extension of yourself once you get into the swing of riding it. It all comes very naturally. It's very well put together in that respect, and there's enough fun about the CFMoto to really enjoy it on the twisties too. I don't like to be too negative about this bike, but you know, the way I've talked about how it felt and behaved on the motorway, it's much better when you're not trying to rev it, when you're not reaching the upper echelons of the rev range. It's a lot happier because it is too buzzy and clattery up there. The suspension on this bike, Marzocchi suspension, is decent stuff, and I would certainly argue that of all the components on the QJ, the suspension is probably its best feature. It holds the road really well, it doesn't dive unduly, it's firm enough for fairly sort of sporty, spirited riding. The fact that it's got the same tyres as the Morini and the CFMoto means that the handling of the QJ actually isn't too bad. It is heavier, certainly than the CFMoto, but there is a bit of a bulk to the QJMotor. You can see it's got crash bars on it, you can see it's got these the extra bars for the panniers and things. There is quite a bit of, let's not call it excess baggage, but there is a bit of extra weight on the QJMotor that the others have. But there's no real getting away from the fact that it does feel quite crude. But on twisty roads, you can have fun on it. I'd argue that it's marginally more fun than the Kawasaki, actually, to roll between bends. The throttle response is okay. I mean, it is on a cable. I think it's cabled to a potentiometer, so there is some electrical assistance in there. The fueling on the QJMotor is erratic at lower revs. The bottom end in terms of throttle response, in terms of fueling, it's as crude as the rest of the bike, to be honest. Once you're in the mid-range is where this bike is happiest, but certainly slower speed stuff, if you're going to do a U-turn, slower manoeuvres around town, that kind of thing, it's very hard to find a sweet spot on the throttle, and it then does have a tendency to jerk as you're trying to balance clutch and throttle together. The clutch is light, by the way, worth mentioning that. Suspension is good on the QJMotor. It's let down by the fueling and the throttle response. So there is an element of fun, but that crude engine, the throttle response, it's certainly not a winner in terms of riding on the twisties. That takes us back to our Morini. This is actually rather a pleasure to ride on twisty stuff. It's quite a composed, compact chassis when you compare it with some of the others. Although it's got the similarities with the engine, the suspension on this is, again, firm enough to allow for sort of spirited riding. It's nowhere near as much fun as the BMW, but the suspension is adjustable as well. Forks and shock have both got adjustability. You've both rebound and compression on the forks, but we've been riding it in its standard setting as we have with all the other bikes, and it's got similarities with the CFMoto. I've already drawn that comparison, actually. I'm talking about the Motorway stuff, and this is where these two bikes become fairly similar again. That nice sort of commanding adventure bike position on these and the wide bars make it a pleasure, again, to make relatively gentle progression, you know, to make progress on this. It is a nice bike to ride on the twisty roads. Like I say, it remains composed. It's got that feeling of a low centre of gravity. It's a very confident bike to be on. Same tyres as the CFMoto and the QJ, so let's not make too much of a song and dance about those. The brakes work on as well on this as they do on the other bikes as well. So the Morini, yeah, it's nice, composed. It's got a lowish feel to it. It's got a confident feel to it, and it is fun too. So I'm going to move from there just to talk about economy a little bit, because that's all the sort of road riding covered. But in terms of miles per gallon, what have these bikes been getting? Should we do them in reverse order? And I could have started with the Morini. It's the bike with the biggest tank, 18.5 litres. As I said earlier, it's also the heaviest bike here. And that managed 55.8 miles to the gallon, which isn't terrible, but that was the Morini, 55. Next up, we've got the QJ, 56.4 miles to the gallon. Again, in terms of weight, it's a good 10 kilos lighter than the Morini. But yeah, the miles per gallon, there or thereabouts really, not a lot in it compared with the Morini. The CFMoto, you may not be surprised to know, 56.6 miles to the gallon. So our three Chinese contenders, almost pretty much punching the same. There's virtually nothing in it between those, all around the 55, 56 mark. So next up takes us to the Kawasaki, and it's quite a big jump, 64.1 miles to the gallon by the time we get to the Kawasaki. So that's quite a difference. That then finally brings us back to our winner in terms of miles per gallon, and that's the BMW at 67.4 miles to the gallon. It's the lightest, the most powerful, but it's obviously the most efficient. To have a roundup in terms of how they've all performed on the road, least fun on the road. It's very close between the QJMotor and the Kawasaki once again. But unfortunately, because of that throttle response, the fueling, the QJ does come out bottom of the pile again. The Kawasaki, we all want a little bit of fun in our lives, and it just doesn't have enough of that for when you're on that sort of everyday road riding, when you're on the twisty stuff. It's a tough call, but the Morini is going to come in third place. There's nothing wrong with the Morini at all. But the CFMoto is better, which is our second place bike. But our winner on the road, without question, is the BMW. It's come out top in all the stats, all the specs that I've mentioned, and that bit of sportiness combined with the comfort that it has. The only thing that lets it down a little bit for me, and this makes me sound like a whining old git, is the automated clutch. And That's the only thing that takes a little bit away from the BMW, but on-road performance, handling, fun, boom, the BMW is our winner there. So of course the dream of owning an adventure bike is that you are going to take it off-road. Now, we have ventured off the tarmac on these, but to be honest, we've not gone for anything too gnarly or difficult. Gentle green laning is really about as much as most people are going to do with these bikes. And it's really as much as you could expect off of these bikes. You know, any bike can be an adventure bike, but look, they've got high mud guards on them, they've got knobbly tyres, they've got high level exhausts on a few of them. We need to see how well they perform off the tarmac. But let's talk through each one individually. I'm going to start again with the BMW. Now, you may recall that I've literally just said how sporty and how much fun this bike is on the road. And of course, the moment you start getting on unbroken surfaces, dirt, grass, that kind of thing, all that sportiness works against you. So it's a bit of a filling rattler when you get off-road. It's not to say it can't do it, but it instantly becomes apparent how much of a road bike this is when you take it off-road and try standing up on it. Now, the eagle-eyed of you will notice that it's also the only bike with cast wheels on it. But that's simply because the wire-spoked option isn't available from BMW as yet. And the riding position isn't really cut out for standing up properly. I found that it was, the bars were too low, the tank isn't quite in the right place for my knees. It's not a green laner, this bike, at the end of the day. And of course there is that thing with the clutch. Now, I thought that might be a bit more of a problem when we were riding on the dirt, but it actually made it, if anything, a little bit easier, because it then works like a quick shifter. You're clicking up and down through the gears without having to worry about the clutch. There was a time when we laughed at the idea of a quick shifter off-road, but these days it makes the whole job a lot easier. So it's just the suspension and the riding position isn't really conducive to green laning where the BMW is concerned. So the Kawasaki, it's got those kind of rally raid looks to this fairing. It looks like it's got the longest forks of all the bike here because of the way this bike's balanced and the way it looks. But that soft suspension, it really doesn't take much effort at all to bottom those forks out. You can not only hear it when you're riding along, of course you can feel it up through your arms. Each time you hit any sort of significant bump or rock, they're practically hitting the bottom, those forks. Ground clearance isn't great on this either. You can probably see as we're standing here looking at the bikes that the Kawasaki doesn't sit that tall. It's surprising given its looks how adept at off-road it isn't. I keep having to qualify off-road, we're talking mild green lanes. The riding position is nice, you stand nice and tall on it when you're standing up. There's quite tall risers on the handlebars, so the handlebars sit in the right place. Because it's not like riding an enduro bike. When you're riding these bikes off-road, you tend to stand bolt upright because you're enjoying the countryside, you're looking around, you're seeing what's going on. And you can stand up on the Kawasaki quite happily, but the suspension runs out of travel too quickly and the ground clearance is a bit low. In terms of tractability off the throttle, no problems with that at all. Again, with all of these, the tyres were fine. We're riding mainly on grass. It is a little bit slippery, no problems with tyres on any of these bikes. So yeah, the Kawasaki, not as good as it looks off-road. We're going to move over to the CFMoto again. One look at that little upswept Akrapovic, it's got KTM vibes, isn't it? And there's no question, because there is that connection with CFMoto and KTM. And this actually has more of a genuine rally feel to it that the Kawasaki doesn't have. Again, that big bike feel. You stand up on it, the step over, it's nice and narrow between your legs, so you can get your knees nicely in on that tank when you're off-road. You can brace yourself nicely, the bars fall to the right place. I feel comfortable on the CFMoto, I feel comfortable standing up. Probably of all the bikes here, it's the one that you choose to go off-road on more than the others. If they're all parked up like this, there's a green lane just over there, what one do you want to jump on? Probably the CFMoto, just because its ergonomics are all absolutely spot on for that. The KYB suspension, although sporty enough on the road, it recovers quick enough when you're riding off-road. I think that's a really important thing. You don't get that feeling of the shock bouncing up when it starts getting out of sync or anything like that. It's nicely composed to cope with those sudden changes. When it hits bumps and the suspension has to react quickly, the CFMoto suspension does that with aplomb. Throttle is nice, suspension is perfectly capable, and it's comfortable to ride standing up. Now the QJMotor, the SRT450RX, I've been quite negative about this bike so far, I know I have. But going back to the suspension again, I said it was good on road. It works pretty well on the bumpy stuff as well. There's enough compliance in that suspension that when you do start hitting the bumpy stuff, it does cope as well on the dirt as it does at being sporty on the road. So the QJMotor suspension really is the shining light of this bike. I was quite surprised. I expected it, perhaps I shouldn't have expected anything, but I expected it to be a bit clattering, a bit unwieldy because of how it felt on the road, both on the motorway and on the twisty stuff. But it really did redeem itself in that respect, that although it's quite a heavy bike, it actually copes quite well suspension wise, and the riding position isn't bad once you're standing up as well and off that super thin postage stamp seat. But the throttle doesn't really help. That is that snatchy throttle thing. You know, I was trying to ride fairly slowly at a fairly sort of average comfortable pace to allow you to be able to look around and not just have all your focus on the trail in front. And it's so hard to keep it on a smooth and even keel. It's just so twitchy. If you go that little bit faster, you know, once you sort of going about a 30 mile an hour down a track on this, the suspension can cope with it and the engine is in a much better place when you've actually got the revs. The only perhaps downside of that sweet spot of the engine is, unlike the others here, you do find that you're changing gear a lot more to try and keep it in that sweet spot when you're riding steadily off-road. So by all means, not a loser as far as off-road's concerned. It's just really down to that throttle that is a bit of a problem. So that takes us again from the QJ to hop all the way to the end here to the Allthrike. I've got no idea if I'm saying that right. Of all the bikes here, I've said it before that this feels the lowest and sort of the most compact. That really works in its favour when you're riding it on the dirt. The ground clearance isn't massive. I think it's probably quite close to the KLE, but the suspension on this works really quite nicely. Again, I managed to hit sort of several series of rocks and bumps in a row. We're not talking anything massive, but enough to unsettle the suspension and to be irregular enough to put it to the test. And you know, it's not kicking the back end up, it's staying fairly nice and level. The suspension is doing the work rather than the chassis taking it all. The throttle response is good on this bike anyway. Slightly taller bar risers for me would make me more comfortable, but generally speaking, it's not quite as narrow as the CFMoto for that standover, so your knees are slightly further apart, but not massively so. And it's still got a nice sculptured bit of tank that you can just dig into it just enough. Like the majority of the other bikes here, it's well within its stroke. It's comfortable, it's nice to stand up on, it feels well composed. So I did mention about the sportiness, how it feels like it's got that lower centre of gravity. And for me, I really like that if I'm riding on the dirt. I do like the bike to feel that the majority of weight is low down. And I get that sensation with the Morini. So not a bad performer off-road at all. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a sum up about how these bikes performed off-road and just see which one we think is best. Now, despite being a GS, the sportiness of the BMW, for me, made it feel the least comfortable off-road. I'm not going to say it's not capable, it's just the least comfortable and the least pleasant to ride off-road because it's got that firmer suspension. Moving on from the BMW, I'm then going to go to the Kawasaki, which may be a bit of a surprise, but that clattery front end and the way the forks run out of travel and bottom out so easily, it takes a little bit of the enjoyment away because you know that every time you hit any sort of significant bump, it's going to send it all the way, shockwaves up your arms and through your shoulders, and it's just a little bit disappointing. From there, I'm going to go to, this is tight, between the Morini and the QJ is quite tight, but because of that throttle, the QJMotor is going to go in third place. The suspension was its redeeming feature off-road, but that throttle takes a little bit of the enjoyment away. The Morini, I would quite happily potter along any green lane on that bike. Yeah, I really find that quite enjoyable, but that brings us back to the CFMoto once again. It looks the most capable before you even get on it, and it is the most capable. So in terms of green lane ability, let's not call it off-road ability, green lane ability, the CFMoto 450 MT wins that round. And so that brings us to the end of our test and the final pecking order. So let's do these in from last place. I'm going to start in and work our way up. I think that's the best way to do it. Probably won't come as much surprise that the QJMotor is back in 5th place. It's just too crude, it's too basic, it feels unfinished, it feels like they've got work to do. There's probably a capable bike in there, but in this competition, with these other bikes here, the QJMotor is in 5th spot. Now 4th spot becomes a little bit trickier. It's very much going to be a run between the Moto Morini and the KLE. I'm going to go with the KLE in 4th spot, the Kawasaki. There's nothing particularly wrong with this bike, and that's the reason it is in 4th spot. I introduced it as being grey in colour and fairly grey in personality, and it's done nothing to change my opinion in that. It will be dependable. It will take you anywhere you want to go, and you won't get any problems with this bike. But it's a 4th place bike for me, just because it lacks any kind of excitement. And that brings us on to 3rd spot, and these are 3 very strong contenders for our podium. 3rd place is going to be the Morini. Any reason why? Well, there's nothing that I don't really like about this bike. It does everything that you could want it to do. All right, the name's a bit awkward, but apart from that, it's a perfectly capable machine. The other 2 have just got a bit more going for them, and that's something I'm going to cover in a second. So 3rd place on the podium goes to our Moto Morini, and that brings us to 2nd spot. And for 2nd spot, we're going to the BMW. This is a very, very, very good road bike. I've really enjoyed riding this on the road, but what we're here to find out is which is the best adventure bike. Although as a sporty road bike, there's no way I can fault the BMW. It's a lovely thing to ride. It just lacks that extra dimension that we expect from an adventure bike, that you want to buy into when you buy into the adventure bike dream. It's just that bit that the BMW is missing. So there's only one obvious winner, and that is this bike. It seems like an odd thing to say, but when is a Chinese bike not a Chinese bike? When it's a CFMoto. This brand really does stand on its own 2 feet now, as much as any of the big Japanese brands do in terms of the products that they're delivering. The CFMoto 450 MT ticks every box that a small capacity adventure bike should tick. It's fun, it handles well, it'll do dirt, it'll do tarmac, it'll do distance. All right, we haven't got cruise control, we haven't got a heated seat. It's a 450cc adventure bike. There's an enjoyment and there's pleasure to be had in the fact that this just has what you need. And so that is the winner of this segment of MCN's 2026 Small Adventure Bike of the Year. Now, if you want to leave a comment, and I really would like you to do, if you've got anything to say at all, drop it down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned to MCN in print if you want to read the written review of this test. But otherwise, check out MCN.com for all the news, reviews and everything else motorcycling. Buy MCN on your newsstand, and really look forward to seeing you on the next one.